Hello, happy Sunday, and welcome to week 12 of the Summer Block series. I want to play with some more threads this week. Who am I kidding? I always want to play with thread. So I was looking back through my journal and a couple pages stuck out, and I remember how much I enjoyed doing this. So like this one just screams for lazy daisies. Like this fabric is so beautiful. I thought I'd add some color. This is the cover of my Found Object and Renew journal. And I got this fabric from a friend of mine, Deb, who gives me fabric that she's sick of. Thank you, Deb. I love it. I just put all your fabric to good use and I cherish it so much. And then this is just a simple, I think it's even like you could even almost call it a Christmas fabric. It's just a green fabric with gold sparkly motifs on it. And I had some fun outlining those with different colors. And just this morning, as I was going into my little cabin outside my trailer to find some fabrics to do, this little family of deer was hanging out. So I watched them for a while, and that just was the universe's way of saying, you need to stitch a deer. So I'm gonna start with this little deer while I'm thinking about all of the opportunities and possibilities for stitching on these flowers. I'm going to think about that, but I'm going to outline him in a similar color green just with a back stitch. The great thing about just working something really easy, I know it's hard to decide, on things like stitching is where to start. And I think the best thing to do is just take it one thing at a time. So I'm going to outline him and enjoy doing that while I think about what I want to do here. So the back stitch, and of course I've got this piece of batting in the background. I do like to have that little puffiness, so I like the batting or stabilizer or something. And I know I've showed this a million times, but I'm going to just show you again. The back stitch is just that, coming back or from where your stitch is coming out. Making sure that where your stitch is coming out is right in the middle where you enter and exit your needle. I've got 2 strands of DMC floss here. Let's try to keep the stitches as evenly as possible. You want to go into where you came out before. And I guess I'm working somewhere between 1/8 and 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so I'm going to outline this deer. I have to go just a little smaller on the stitching when I round these tiny little corners around his feet. And I'm going to just do all the way his back, probably not even there because I know I'm going to do a bunch of stitching in here. I'm just going to work his head, maybe right here around his ear to there. And I'll leave that. I might do this similar color and back stitch up here, but I'm not 100% sure yet. So I'm just going to do the deer for now. Okay, so I finished stitching his little outline and I turned the silhouette into a little bit more dimension just by doing a few stitches up his front leg, pushing that back leg behind on both sides, and then just giving him a little tail. And then as I was stitching, I decided, I think his antlers, I'm going to start here. I didn't do the stitching here because I thought it would be pretty to do a chain stitch, just a continuous chain stitch for his antlers. So coming up right in the middle, that's not quite the middle, let's see, and right on the line. I'm just going to work a series of chain stitching. And these are going to be relatively small because the curves are pretty deep. So I'm going to go into where I came in. And now I'm going to work in the middle of this just so that that chain stitch covers both sides. And I'm not going to commit to the leaves on his antlers yet. I might do something different with those. So I'm going to leave that option open and just stop the chain stitch right here. And of course the chain stitch, just make sure the thread is behind the needle when you come down. Okay, so I'm going to end that there, catching the loop, and then come right back here, maybe right there, and work up each antler. Okay, so we'll go to here. I'll leave that flower open, so because I know I'm going to be stitching on top of that. Maybe a little guy here, here, and here. And then on this side, just do the same thing, but make the chain stitches face this way. Okay, so I'll work that. Okay, so just starting with some of the background flowers, I've been working some bullion, some French knots, and then inside the chain stitch lines for his antlers. I wanted his antlers to stick out a little bit more, so I'm taking this brown rayon thread. It's about the equivalent of a, oh, I suppose a size 5 pearl cotton, maybe somewhere between an 8 and a 5 pearl cotton. And I'm just working a little back stitch inside the chain loops. So coming up at the top of a chain loop, going down the bottom, and then sliding the needle in through the back. So once you go through the bottom of the chain, you can come up the top of the next chain, go down the bottom of the chain, and then knot it off in the back. So for the little pink flowers, I decided to stay same color, maybe a little darker, just to add dimension. So I didn't change the shape of these flowers at all. So this is 2 strands of DMC floss. And I just worked just little tiny bullions for the flower petals. So I came up through the middle. I go in at the tip of the petal and then just scoop up a tiny little piece of fabric, ending out where your thread is originally coming from. And this is little, so I'm just wrapping it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Before I pull the needle through, I make sure I'm just going to keep my thumb on top of those wraps. Gently pull. And then when you feel the resistance, just bring the yarn forward and stab it into the tip of the flower petal again. So we'll do another one real quick. So coming out the middle, little scoop of fabric where the thread is coming out of. 1, 2, 3. Hold them in place, pull the needle, and then exit the needle out the back at the top of the bullion. Then in the center of the flowers, I took a white thread, size 8 pearl cotton, and I just worked a French knot. And then as you can see, I worked just a few French knots outside of the design. So those white dots weren't there, but I just thought that that would be more festive and another addition to the piece. So just one wrap, bring the yarn under, poke it down right next to where you're coming out of. And before I pull the needle through, I pull the thread to make sure that that knot is going to wrap around the needle. And that way I can ensure I always get those really great little French knots. Okay, so for this orange flower, I want to stay in this starburst sort of feel. So I just took a matching color thread, an orange thread. Okay, this is a Sulky 12 weight thread. So I'm just coming up at the base of the flower in the center. And then just making a line right up the middle of it. Scooping a little piece of fabric at the top so I can pop a bead down there. And then on either side of the line, about halfway up that petal, I'm going to work a little fly stitch. Exiting out the base of that petal. And then I'll put a bead on and add to that little cluster that I've got going there in the center. So I did this for the most forward 8 petals. Okay, and then on in between the main petals, there are these little back petals. So all I'm doing here is just working a little seed stitch on them just to add some texture and color. Put some yellow in there. There's not a lot of yellow in this design, and I can add a little bit. So a seed stitch is just 2 stitches right next to each other. Okay, so for the leaves, I wanted a little bit more texture than just a chain stitch could provide. So we're going to make a little bit of a modification on one. So what I did, I wanted the point to be out here towards the leaf. So what I did is I just put in a little stitch at the base of the leaf near the stem. Just like a little tiny guy. Then some of the leaves I did single and some I did double. So this is a smaller leaf, so I'm just going to do a single one. I'm coming up at the point of the leaf, inserting the needle underneath that little stitch I made. So I'm not picking up any of the background fabric, just that little stitch. And then going down at the point again. Because some of these leaves I do want to see the bright underneath. I just thought with a darker we'll get a more dramatic leaf look, so that's why I decided to go this way. Now this is a bigger one, so we're going to do this a double. So it works the same. So you're just putting in your base stitch here, come up. Now not directly at the point, we're going to do the inner one, so just before the point. See how I'm leaving a little bit of fabric open there. Come up, go under that stitch, come back down, and then you're just going to work the same thing again, but this time going all the way out to the point. And I'm just staying above this other stitch, still in the same wrap. And then going down at the point again. And when I pull it, I just pull it slowly and just make sure it lays flat so I can see both stitches on the inside. And that gives a nice little bit of a more of a texture than just a regular chain stitch would provide. So I'll work the rest of these little leaves. Again, I'll probably do all singles here, except this one will be a double. This one might be a double, single, single, maybe do a double here. You know, just make decisions as you go and just see what it looks like. But I really am happy with the leaves. I think it makes the antlers really stand out. So then I'll work the few little things in here, try to figure out what I want to do next. I really like the design of this, so I'm not sure I'm going to do much. I might just take maybe red or some dynamic color and just outline it with a stitch and maybe pop a bead right here. I like that little design, and I think if I put too much thread in, it's going to cover it. And then I've got a fun idea here, so I'm gonna work that and we'll see if that works out. Okay, so I finished my leaves. You know, I found this little hoop, this tiny little hoop, and as I'm working this piece, I think I'm gonna make it just its own little art piece. So I hooped it, and I'm gonna leave this hoop as the frame, and then just when the stitching is done, what I'll do is tuck all of this in and then put a backing on it and then use this as the hanger. I really like the look of that. I love the idea of an art piece that hangs from the hoop that it was stitched in. So I'm gonna do that. And honestly, I don't always use a hoop, but it really does make the stitching a little bit easier and keeps the fabric taut. So for this little flower, I decided to just outline it in this really bright watermelon color. 2 strands of DMC floss. Work under this. This is the next thing I'll show you. I really love how that's coming out. So I'll show you that next. This just doesn't add a lot of texture, but it adds a lot of color to this piece. So right from the middle, I'm just going halfway down so that you can still see the original color underneath. And then we'll just leave the top of that tucked in because that's going to be under this little cabbage rose. Okay, so now to work these little chains, it almost looks like crochet, doesn't it? But it's just stitching with needle. So what you do, I'll work on these outer petals so you can see. But I'm putting 3 stitches outlining the outer part, the curve. So 1 up the side, 1 in the middle, and then 1 at the point. And I'm not doing anything with the inner line there, just the curvy line. So the curve, top of the arc, got a little off there, didn't I? But you know what we're gonna do next, it really won't matter. Okay, so that is with 2 strands of DMC floss. So I have 6 strands of DMC floss of the same color, and I'm going to come up, now this is a dull needle, so it's a little tricky to get it up through there, with all that fabric. But I'm coming up at the base of the first stitch I did. And this is just a blanket stitch, worked over the stitch, but not through the fabric. So what you do is just put the stitch towards the back, take your dull needle, go under the first stitch, over the thread, and then just pull it up like a loop, like you're just doing a blanket stitch on an edging. In the middle, I did 2 stitches. And on the end, just another 1. So you're working 4 blanket stitches in those 3 initial stitches there. Now before I go into this one, what I want to do is stab this down behind sort of where I'm coming out of that stitch. I'm going to stab it down back into the fabric. And then at this first stitch on the next petal, I'm going to come up just in front of it, almost in the same hole that it's coming out of. So 1 in the side stitch, 2 in the middle stitch, and then 1 in this side. This is one of the reasons why I hate a hoop. I'm always getting caught up on that thing. And then once you're done with that, just stab it into the little shell behind. So you're making these sweet little shells that look like crochet. So it's really, really simple. I'm going to do the same thing on this flower too, just with a similar color to the flower. But I think it's going to be the cutest little art piece, so I'm just going to be careful and try to work around this little thing as much as I can. And I do enjoy working on this all hooped up. It's just, I don't like to hoop a lot of the times when I'm working these dimensional stitches if it's like a bigger piece, just because I hate the idea of a hoop smushing the stitches. But this hoop I really do love. I've used this before in the videos, and if you can get your hands on these, I think I just got these over at Joann's, but it's so phenomenal where you can just put your fabric in and then just droop like that, and you can move it all the time, where this just seems to smush the stitches. For me, I just don't like it. But since I'm not moving the hoop, I went ahead and hooped it, and like I said, I just think it's going to be the sweetest little art piece hanging in the trailer. Since we see deer just about every day, I'd like to honor that. So that's what I'm going to do with this block. Okay, so I've worked the little chain stitch cabin roses here. I really like that. Happy with that. So I'm still not sure exactly what I'm going to do on these 3 main flowers, but I know like this and this, I'm just going to work like a feather or a fern stitch, just the classic stitch. You know, sometimes you just got to let the fabric tell you what to do, and that just seems like an obvious choice here. For these little guys, I've got this silk thread, and I think what I'm going to do for the stems is a split stitch. So what that looks like is I'm just coming up on the stem and making my first stitch, then come up in this stitch itself, right in the center of it, and it splits the fibers of that stitch. And then here, I think I will just make 3 lazy daisies. Just seems like that would be very pretty. Very simple. I am trying to show new stitches, things I haven't shown before in this series, but also sometimes just the lazy daisy makes the most sense, so that's what we're gonna do, even though I do that all the time. So I know you all know how to do this by now if you've been watching. If you've been embroidering for a while or watching my vids. You can see just with this one stem how much brighter that is. So I love that. And I think right here in between all of them, I'm just going to pop a little bead in there. Just a little size 8 seed bead. It's like a pearlescent color that reflects a lot of the colors that are in this piece. Just simple. Sometimes, you know, we're working a lot of different details, so simplicity is fine in the individual pieces because as a whole it looks really complex. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for these 3. I'm also going to come down here and in peach do the same thing with the same bead in between, just to bring some continuity here. So that'll take care of those. And then I will just do a little quick snippet of what that little fern stitch or feather stitch, I'm not sure which one I'm going to do. I'll see which one fits better, but I will show you that, and then we'll come back and talk about these 3 flowers. Okay, so I finished these little leaves, and this one was really bright and it stood out. So I just decided to make 2 more. On the side, I just drew a little shape and then stitched the same way. The peach is done. So now let's talk about these. And maybe I want to fill in these lazy daisies with a color, maybe yellow. So I'm going to start with yellow in this orange flower and outline it with a size 8 pearl cotton. Do that with a stem stitch. So keeping the thread on the outside of the circle, I do want that orange to still show. So I'm gonna go a little bit over, and then right between where I'm coming out and I just went in, I'm picking up a little bit of thread, keeping that thread on the outside. These stitches need to be really little here since we're working on a curve. Now I'm gonna go 1/8 of an inch away, pick up the stitch that I ended with here, and then I'll just stab that down because I know I'm gonna work that flower next. And anywhere there's an orange outline, I'm gonna just go ahead and outline it in yellow. For each of the dot, I'm gonna do a single strand of DMC and just do a little, little star stitch, just maybe in 6 places. Just kind of divide them up like a little pie. And then right in the center, just put one of these aqua beads on. I love the contrast of orange and blue, it's so pretty. And then I'm gonna go through that bead twice because I like the little hole of the bead poking up. It just gives an extra little bit of dimension there. So here, I did these 5 lazy daisies with an extended catching stitch. So I think I'm gonna take this same DMC floss, 3 strands, and just do 1 stab stitch just to fill the center, and then maybe pop yellow beads on here, which sort of makes these two reference each other, where we've got aqua on the orange, and then we'll have orange and yellow on the aqua stitching. Okay, so I finished that guy. Really like how that came out, super sweet. So I've just been looking at this flower, and I think what I want to do is just make lines with this dark teal that go across to start. I may outline these, I probably will, but I think to start, I'm going to work just above where this pink is, and I'll probably put some pink French knots and then a big bead right in the center. So let's see what that's going to look like. And again, you know, we're just playing. Obviously, you're going to have different fabric than me. And just look at each motif individually, and rather than just look at the whole thing and go, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Because it's really easy to fall into that place, isn't it? With anything. But break it down. So if I do 3 lines across each petal, I think that's gonna look cool. I'll outline the petal, maybe put like a French knot up here. And then I think I'll couch each line that I did with a silver bead. Here I know I wanna do this silver, and I'm thinking silver because I've got this silver little gear spoke. I use these a lot. I love these flat beads. There's so much you can do. Like, look how much that adds just by putting that bead down. And then I'll probably work just maybe 3 or 4 French knots in there just to hold that bead in place. Back in, and make enough French knots so that that bead doesn't slip off. 1, 2, 3. No, I think that's gonna stay on there. I love the way that looks already. So I'll work on that. after I do the lines, I think I'll outline each one after, just so that I can make sure that the ends of those lines get covered up. And then again, with a small thread, probably in the same color as this, is put a silver bead going up each one. And then pink French knots surrounding this bead here. Okay, so I like that little flower with those beads, pretty dynamic. This flower, I think all I'm gonna do is maintain the color of the fabric and just outline it with a split stitch. And that's it for this one. And I'll probably put some French knots here. So I know there's a million options to do on each of these things, and it's just fun to practice and play on these fabrics, because even if you're making a quilt and you're using fabrics, you may find that the fabrics themselves could need a little bit of help, something extra, something that makes it yours, and stitching on it could be just the thing that a quilt might need. So I hope you've enjoyed stitching along with me and coming up with some ideas for stitching on the fabrics that you have. So what I'm going to do now is just finish outlining these petals with the split, throwing some French knots in a real bright pink. And then I am going to use this as a little art piece, so I'm going to keep this hoop right where it is. Then what I want to do is, you know, we've got some of this noise in the background, some of the other fabrics. I don't want to stitch on these just because I really want this to be what your eye goes to when you see the little piece. So what I'm going to do is just take here, I'll just go ahead and do it. I've got this same color thread as the background, and I'm just going to work some seed stitch in the back just to, you know, have something, you know, so it's not just blank, yet at the same time pushing the background into the back. And I think just with this little bit of texture, that will achieve that. So just working 2 stitches side by side, trying to keep the stitch length the same. I'm going to pretend that the print isn't there and just work these stitches maybe every 3/4 of an inch apart. When you're working seed stitch, just make sure you vary the direction of the way the stitches go, and then it looks real organic. See, what you want is just, you want it to look like someone just scattered some seeds right on the background. So then when I'm finished with the stitching, I'm going to just gather this here, baste it, stitch it to this batting and some of the stitching, and then I'll just place a cover piece, maybe felt, and then just stitch around the edge here, and that will finish off this piece. And then I can just hang it up and admire some of the collection of threads that I have on a fabric that I absolutely love. Speaking of admiring threads and fabrics, I have a couple photos to share with you. This is Sarah's block from last week, her fabricami. Absolutely beautiful. I told her, I said, this makes me want to have a pumpkin spice latte. It's so delicious looking. So thank you for sharing, Sarah. It's lovely. You really do incredible work. And then this block I got from Debbie. This was her design of paper piecing, and it's just stunning. I love the fabric that she used here for the stem and the leaves, and the flowers so sweet, and the colors are just beautiful together. So well done, bravo. I mean, it's a beautiful block. And this is the finished little deer stitching from this week, and I'm gonna just love looking at this and hanging it up. He'll probably live right next to the little elephant that we did earlier. I want to thank you again so much for joining me for the 6-inch summer square series. This was block 12. Next week for block 13, I think I want to play with some curved piecing. So just grab out a couple, maybe 3-4 different fabrics that you like and blend together, and we'll work on hand stitching on a curve. Thanks again. You guys have a great week. Happy stitching. Bye-bye.